look, I concur with the other two speakers who've spoken about the issue of diversity and inclusion. But I think that for me, the important thing is that as we talk about diversity and inclusion, we talk about systematic racism. These things in corporations to be successful have to be driven from the top. And leadership also listen to the staff at all sectors of the organization. But I think as we talk about these things and the fact that these inequalities, both in society and in the corporations, have been enhanced by the COVID, by all the crises that we have around us. We talk about environmental issues, we're talking about wars, food shortages, issues of food security. We have to understand that they're impacting more Black people than white people in society, and that women are more impacted by these crises that we face today. But we have to realize that the issue of racism, of diversity, of inclusion is not a new topic. These are issues that we've talked about, I think, for years or maybe centuries. And that it is important to find how can we move forward. And I think for me, the important thing is that corporations do not exist in isolation of the societies in which we exist. So it is important to understand that when employees come to an organization in the morning and they enter the gates of an organization, they don't stop being Black, Indian, Asian, being women, being disabled, being LGBTQ members. They come with that into the organization. And so organizations have got to embrace all of that diversity. But for me, I think the time has come for us not to tinker and to talk openly about racism as it happens in organization and in society. And for me, unless we fully engage with the histories of our countries in terms of the colonial past, in terms of how Black people were transported into the Americas or into the UK or into the Caribbean, we talk about the inequities that exist in South Africa and continue to exist even after the so-called independence, because we have not got rid of racism in South Africa. It just has manifested itself into a different form. I think understanding history and engaging with that history in organization, to me, is very, very imperative. Because if we do not understand our history, if we don't understand where we come from, we don't see where the opportunities are to correct that history, because that history still manifests itself in society and it manifests itself in our organization. And I do think that the issue of racism must be addressed clearly. I know it is a very emotive issue, people say so, but that's part of the history that we live with. And for me, this thing of using all of these nice words about inclusion, about people participation, basically inclusion is about allowing everybody access into every sector, equal access into education, equal access into opportunities to gain financial wealth, equal opportunities really to participate in every sector of society and even in organization. Because if we look at the McKinsey study that has been done recently, it shows that for women to achieve equity in organization, it's going to take them 150 years or to over 200 years to achieve that equity. So that means it's worse for Black people in terms of achieving that equity. But I think that when we look at the people, and I think you asked the question, what is the connection between the private sector, companies and government? I think they work in tandem. If you see the people who set the agenda for the world through Davos or the Club of Rome, you'll see that governments are there with corporations setting the agenda for the world. And now everybody is talking about the great reset of Davos. But fortunately, they have realized whether they do something effective about it, they've realized that the great reset that they're talking about cannot happen unless they address fully and squarely the issue of systematic racism in society and in corporations. As I said, for me, change starts at the leadership level. And I think that leaders in organizations, if they don't understand the history of racism in their societies, I don't think that they can lead, in my view, very effectively. Because you can't lead something that you don't understand, you don't have a clue about. And to me, there's an imperative of creating change in society. And so if you ask, as I say, for me, the individual level is important. Corporations can talk about diversity and inclusion, but what happens at home? Because my dad taught us that charity begins at home. If what happens in your home is that you allow, what is the conversation that happens? Is the conversation that happens denigrating Black people or people who are different from you? Is the environment, the conversation, the communication in your home and neighborhood about inclusivity? What are you allowing your children to see, to view, to read? And so for me, the change actually begins there. Then it goes into the workplace environment. And I think for me, the issue of having a Black History Month, to me, is a misnomer. I think Black people exist in society on a daily basis. And their lived experience, they experience racism on a daily basis, not just in a particular month. And so when we talk about racism, it should be something that is talked upon on a daily basis and addressed on a daily basis. And it can't be because there's Black History Month, that's when we celebrate the achievements of Black people. The achievements of Black people have formed the basis of the economic growth of this society. So those achievements have to be celebrated all throughout the year, not just on Black History Month. And I think that we have to also encourage dialogue throughout the year, not just in Black History Month. And the training in terms of anti-racism, in terms of diversity, in terms of inclusion, has to occur continuously within organizations, because we know that if people go for training for 1 or 2 days or 3 days, they are bound to forget that if this is not reinforced. Repetition is key in terms of impressing in the minds of people what is the correct behavior. And I think for me, with those few words, I'd like to stop there and allow for questions.